Hello and welcome back to Wet Wednesdays. Hopefully you've grabbed yourselves a beer. So this week we are actually going to look into a bit of a history of beer. Like everything to do with history, I'll just move that chair out the way. Like everything to do with history, there's many versions written. This show is purely for entertainment, and I'll start that bit of the script again. This is purely for entertainment, and it's just good luck if what I say helps you win a pub quiz sometimes, but if you do, you definitely owe me a pint. This really is just a quick overview and some little stories that I like about beer. Basically, as big events have happened in Britain, it's changed the beer that we drink and the alcohol we drink, and that sort of fascinates me, and you can travel and learn so much about history with that. There are a few bits missing and things like that. This is just a taste of the story and a bit of an entertainment. I'd be on for hours and hours if I was to give you the full story. But let's tell me if you like hearing about the history of beer, and then we can do some more episodes on it, because like I said, it's a very vast subject. And also if there's anything else that you would like to hear about and get me to research for on your behalf, then I will consider it depending on how much work it is. So first of all, and it's already on the screen at that side, if you're enjoying this week's stream, like our social media, facebook.com/formalshark, and if you've on the Twitter, at Let's Drink Formal Shark. Also, if you're watching this right now, really appreciate if you just press the share button and say, I'm watching this and it's good, or I'm watching this and it's bad. Well, don't tell people it's bad, but if you do, I don't know why you'd be watching it. But yeah, that really helps us. It gets people watching it. The more people that watch it, the more likely I am to do more, because I'm a vain human being and like to be adored. But let's do what we do every week, and that's have some form of drink. And this week it is Sour City by the Overworks Brewery, and it's a citrus tart IPA. It is 4.5%. Its IBU is 15. And once I've scrolled down after pouring, I'll tell you the price. The price was £3.25, and that was from the Brewdog website. That's doing deliveries, and it didn't take too long, but they seem to be only doing packs of beer, so you have to do what they want in a pack. But it's a place to get beer at the minute. So it's smelling very sherbety. You can smell the sourness to it. I've lost the power of speech before even tasting it. It's not a good sign, is it? Very fruity in its taste. Very much like a slightly sour umbongo or something like that. If you're not a beer drinker, but you're something like a cider drinker or a white wine drinker, then I would recommend that. Obviously, if you're a beer drinker as well and you like sours, try that. It's not overly sour. It doesn't like pull your cheeks in and distort you or anything. But it's quite... Its description says it's an approachable, balanced and endlessly crushable. With juicy dry hops and grapefruit zest, this IPA is just the beginning. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that to people, so that's good. So let's play a ditty and then get on. So the history. And in this for the history, we must start in the beginning. And in the beginning, there was man, woman, and turtles. Early on, humans realised that rotten fruit and grain would get you shit-faced. Historians think that early humans would have worked for only about 5 hours a day. So they had lots of leisure time and would not invent a TV, so they'd really only had sex and drinking to do. And a fun fact, elephants will seek out rotten fruit to get them leery. And there was a lovely thing on Twitter just as the lockdown started, of a load of elephants that got into a vineyard and had a bit of wine, and basically they'd got all leery and then fell asleep. So it's just in our instinct to get laid and find lovely alcohol. Some historians think we stopped being hunter-gatherers so that we could make liquids to get us wankered. Throughout the world, alcohol was seen as a liquid from the gods. Civilizations that had never met all came to the same conclusion. Alcohol is magic, it's good, and it's a gift from the gods. The first beers made from barley was in Iran in 3000 BC. And women were the first brewers. Alewives emerged around the 5th century. This started with the women making beer for their families. They then started to sell any extra beers they had. And some of them even set up rough versions of bars in their homes. These homes were houses that were open to the public, and this is where the term public house or pub comes from. Hops and their preserving powers were the beginning and the end for women in brewing, well, for now. And as the preserving properties would mean that the beer would last for longer and be able to be mass produced. Basically making beer profitable, and the guys wanted in. Nowadays there's some amazing women in brewing, and they're starting to really kick the men's ass again, because they're really innovative and they're really good to seek out some of the people that work in the brewing industry. And it's hopefully one day it'll be a level playing field again. So let's look at the hops. As we know from the Beer Questions live stream, hops are very important. And in 822 AD, an abbot of the monastery in France wrote down a list of rules for running the abbey. And it included collecting wild hops for making beer. The cultivation of hops was probably introduced from Flanders to England in the Maidstone area of Kent at the end of the 15th century. Our natural drink until that had been an unhopped, sometimes flavoured with herbs and wormwood. Brewers started to import dried Flemish hops, and they were used as a preservative that was reluctantly accepted by the Englishmen. By the 17th century, unhopped beer was no longer popular, and hop beer was the drink of the Englishmen. So now we're going to look at the history of two types of beer that became popular, and one story I really like, and one that's is still very good. So drinkers were asking for a mix of beers, and so what was happening is people would ask for different beers mixed up, and a popular variety of this was the Three Threads. A mix of an old-style sweet ale with no hops, a lightly hopped ale, and 2 penny, a strong ale. For anybody wanting to be served behind some cocktail drinkers, it's just a pain and takes a load of time. So in 1722, Ralph Harwood from Bell's Brew House in Schwarzwich replicated the beer, but in one brew. This style quickly caught on and became the drink of the porters in London. Porters were strong and heavily hopped, meaning they stored all year round, resulting in good drinking outside of the prime brewing seasons of October and March. Porter's brewing on the big scale happened with Sam Whitbread, as in like Whitbread that owns Premier Inns and crap pubs that are attached to Premier Inns. And his tun room was so big that tourists were attracted to it that came as a tourist attraction. Henry Thettle felt not very well endowed in the old porter vat department, so he built an even bigger tun room. When it was finished, he had a sit-down meal with 100 guests in it. Then in the little porter room department, Maxu Brewery felt inadequate and built an even bigger one and hosted 200 guests. But at Maxu Brewery, one of the iron hoops holding the vats had a crack in it. A workman noticed it. He scratched his arse and said, bugger it, and didn't tell anybody about it. Then a few hours later, bang! A tidal wave of beer came streaming out the vats. The brewery wall stood no chance, and the wall was 25 feet high and 1 foot thick. First, people drowned to death. Others in the stampede for free beer. And if they survived the crush, they died of alcohol poisoning. But in this little tale, there's still tragedy. The bodies were laid in a nearby house. People wanted to gawp at these bodies that had been drowned in beer. So much so, the owner of the house charged people to gawp at the lifeless the lifeless, stampeded and drowned bodies, because it was a sight to see. Too many people were in the house, so the first floor collapsed. So the Gawpers went to meet their grim reaper themselves. Porters came out of fashion when the technology improved, and now people were drinking out of glasses. They could see the horrible look what porter was, being a dark drink, and we're a thicker lot, so we didn't want to drink that. But I really do think that's a fantastic story of how a lot of people died. Maybe I shouldn't be laughing at the death. Anyway, now we'll have a look at the IPA, probably the biggest beer in the craft beer. And the history of the IPA is often argued amongst historians, and even more if they've had a jar or two. So this may or may not be how it went, but as long as you talk to someone that's not got an opinion on the matter, all you'll seem is brainy or an alcoholic. In the oldie days, Britain was making an empire around the world. It was the golden age for the Daily Mail reader. The problem was India is a hot country, so not the ideal conditions for beer. The likes of pale ales would spoil on journeys. So a London brewer in 1780s made a brew high in alcohol and high in hops. So it would travel well, and it did. And it also caught on as a style, so people were drinking it in this country as well. It's now one of the most popular styles. It has changed a lot since then, but I'm still very happy to drink it. And that's a couple of stories just from about a couple of different types. So now we're going to look at the wars, First World War and Second World, in the temperance movement at that time. In the 19th century even, the temperance movement was sweeping across the world. With the temperance movement, and in combination with the First World War, emergency measures were introduced that changed a lot with beer, such as there was higher taxation on beer, you had to have lower strength, and there was a ban on buying in rounds, and a restriction on opening hours. I suppose having a ban on rounds means nobody can diddle out of them. Anyway, most were gradually repealed over subsequent years, but it did really change the way and what we drank. In 1920s, over in America, prohibition is put into place, and this bans all alcoholic beverages. But people still wanted to get drunk, so people still drank. But what people drank changed, and a lot of people started drinking spirits and alcohol, like spirits and cocktails, because it was easier to smuggle and hide. Then, on the onset of the Second World War, seen even more restrictions, and there was heavy use of British products rather than getting imports to make the beer. Again, shaping the British ales to be a lower strength and some would argue less taste. But these restrictions weren't applied in Ireland, allowing Irish brewers such as Guinness to continue brewing beers closer to the pre-war strengths. Winston Churchill was basically pissed off at the Irish because they wanted to stay neutral in the World War II. Supplying of agricultural fertilisers, foodstuff and petrol were all stopped being supplied to Ireland. And at Christmas 1940, pumps across the state suddenly run dry, and trains soon stopped running as the supply of coal stalled. Hunger got so bad in Ireland that animals from Dublin Zoo started going missing. The story in London about Ireland was there was no coal, no petrol, no gas, no electric, no power from, but they did have Guinness. Before the war, Guinness made 800,000 barrels of beers annual. By the time the war started, this figure had leaped closer to the million mark. So when Ireland stopped exporting Guinness so they could feed their people, the UK agreed to start trading grain with them. Next, they could not make the beer for the lack of coal. This went on till the Irish people had what they needed. So in the Second World War, Guinness saved Ireland. So after that, we started to basically get into the beers that we got from the war just carried on. Then in the 90s, things like we had before that, but really big in the 90s was when we got to the lager boom and everybody was just drinking lager and sort of other styles were really waning off. You had Camera that had been started in the 70s within the UK that was kind campaigning for sort of good beer. But the beginning of the craft beer began in 1975 when Anchor brews Liberty Ale, and the craft beer movement is born in the US. And because they had prohibition in the 1920s, meant they didn't really have the established tastes that we had of the lower alcohol beers and the lower tastes. So all they had was like Bud and things like that. So the craft brewers in America started looking at the old recipes of the UK and making lots of different recipes from our history that we just weren't making. Yeah, and by the time the 90s had arrived, we had lagers, and basically what was happening is real ale had become stagnant, and it was very much had an image problem, was seen as warm, flat and tasteless. And then in 2007, Brewdog kickstarted the craft beer revolution in the UK, taking inspiration from the American brewers that were taking inspiration from the old British brewers. And we live in a time that is the best time ever for beer, with some amazing bars and breweries. So in this tough time, I've salute anyone making the delicious beers for me, and I really can't wait to meet you all on the other side. So that is my little bit about the history of beer. So I'll have a look at the social media. It looks like we did have some more problems at the start because there was nothing happening. I do apologise. We had a problem with my internet. It just all runs off my phone, and I had the curtains closed because I didn't want to look like an idiot in my living room presenting like Wayne's World, because it's a bit freaky. So it did interrupt it. I will cut it all together nicely and put it back out there for you guys to watch nicely. At the moment it's under 2 parts, and the first half is very rough of this, but hopefully you have enjoyed it. I'm unsure if I'll be doing it next week because I am taking a break. I've got a birthday weekend happening with lots of different things for me to do, basically getting very drunk. And although it does seem very rushed, by the time I've put everything together and done everything, it does take about a week to produce. There was not very much this week. We had massive problems writing it. That's why there isn't the graphics. So what I will do is remind you that we have lots of social stuff. We have our website, formalshark.co.uk, that is getting redeveloped at the moment. We have facebook.com/formalshark, and we have let's drink _FS. You can also, if you want to buy some beer, we do have some offers that you can take advantage of. That means what happens is if you buy beers from these websites off these codes, we get some free beers, and then you get the same codes to use yourselves. So that's great. There's Flavorly and there's Beer 52. I do warn you that Beer 52 is a little bit hard to cancel. You have to ring up, or I normally just tweet them, and that's it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this, even though we did have massive problems with it. I will hopefully fix it for the next time we go on. Hopefully I'll be back next week, but like I said, I'm not going to 100% guarantee it. We also, that's very important, on the 16th, Let's Drink is back. That is the beer review show where we review 3 beers a show. We're going to have 2 shows because what we're doing is recording podcasts, but you can see 2 shows getting recorded. We'll be on Zoom again. We'll be advertising the beers beforehand that you can get from Pip Stop. If you're in the Newcastle and Durham area, they have some fantastic delivery deals where, for example, to get to concert, £20 worth of beer, and they'll deliver it for free. And every time it's been super quick, super helpful as well. I delivered my dad's birthday. I got them to deliver some there, and it just happened that he's the one time a day he goes out for his walk was when they delivered. But they were dead helpful. Went round the back, put it in the barbecue, and then all I had to do was message me dad. So they're definitely worth the thing. So that's thingy. We've had a few messages. It does look like we've had lots of problems tonight. Do apologise. Hopefully there was some information you did get out the show and enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you people watching it. And I will say good night, and I will have my tea now because I am bloody starving. Bye.